comes to questions such as how did we get here and did time have a beginning? Whether it be different religions or people who are convinced that science has got it badly wrong, it can be confusing. So what is the best way to make sense of it all? The younger a person is, or the less time they've spent learning about how the world works, the more likely they are to be confused or led astray. If there was one piece of advice I could give to anyone who is curious, it would be to avoid making assumptions. Don't jump to conclusions which may well turn out to be wrong. The starting point for all of us is our 5 physical senses, but particularly our ears and our eyes. If we can pick something up, shake it, smell it, taste it and see what colour and texture it has, then we can fairly safely conclude that it's real. Of course our senses can be tricked, and we often enjoy illusions and magic tricks. But what if someone who has more life experience is telling us, apparently sincerely, that something is real? Something which no matter how hard we try we cannot see, hear, taste, smell or even feel. How do we know it's real? Well, at first we don't. If we really trust the person telling us this stuff, then some of us can make a small jump and actually believe it. When we do so, it is usually because previous experience has taught us that this source of information is reliable. But what if the person telling us this is dishonest and has some ulterior motive, some reason for wanting us to believe whatever it is? There is a chance we will be conned. This is how confident tricksters and charlatans operate. They prey on people's trust and good nature. In order to see through the scam, we have to rely on our previous experience, our common sense, our ability to tell whether something is plausible or not. And that only comes with time, usually by trial and error. One of the things which pseudoscientists, conspiracy theorists, cult leaders and con artists all have in common is that they use a lot of real, genuine material and information to give the impression that they are honest and objective. But they add stuff in such a way that for the young and impressionable it's hard to tell which bits are real and which are made up. I'm sure there are some pseudoscientists, religious and spiritual people, even conspiracy theorists, who sincerely believe that they are onto something. In other words, they have deluded themselves and then go on to delude others. So what can we do about it? Well, all I can suggest is that if we spot something which we know is wrong, whether it be in real life or online, we can politely intervene and point out to whoever it may concern where the error is and try to explain how and why it's wrong, so that the confusion can be minimized. This applies to the deluded as well as the ignorant. The tricky thing is that, from my observations, the number of people who believe nonsense is far greater than the number who have put in the time and effort to find out how much of it is nonsense. It's as if we're drowning in ignorance and misinformation. Especially now that we have the internet, and anyone with a half-baked theory and some computer skills can put something together which to the untrained eye can seem just as convincing as a more reliable and accurate source of information. One of the best usernames on YouTube, in my opinion, is Grappling Ignorance. It's so true. In the world of the conspiracy theorists don't like being called conspiracy theorists. They prefer to be called researchers or truth seekers. This always makes me think of a line in The Catcher in the Rye, where Holden Caulfield is calling Stradlater a moron, and he says that the one thing about morons is that they don't like being called morons. It might seem quite arrogant of me to claim that conspiracy theorists are not onto something. I'm sure that a small number of them are. It's in human nature, for some of us, to be corrupt enough to conspire to relieve unsuspecting people of their hard-earned cash, whether it be by selling dodgy ideas, dodgy cars, or outright fraud. This aspect of human nature, selfishness, and what I think of as the business mentality, where profit is seen as more important than happiness, peace, and integrity, could be thought of as an illness affecting our society. I'd like to tackle this in more detail in another video. In general, though, I've come to the conclusion that most conspiracy theories are only very tenuously connected to reality. they demonstrate extreme paranoia and are often heavily biased with the evidence they present to support their claims. The same applies to pseudoscience. How do we tell the difference between a pseudoscientist and a real scientist? Recently, I've had a number of comment exchanges on YouTube with a guy called Bill Gaede. Apart from having spent time behind bars for fraud, he has written a book, has a website, and has made videos in which he claims that Einstein and almost every modern scientist is an idiot. He claims that relativity and quantum mechanics are nonsense dreamed up by mathematicians and have nothing to do with physics or science. As an aside, string theory is a mathematical theory which, although interesting, has not added much to our understanding of the universe. As far as Mr. Gaede is concerned, though, string theory is in the same category as relativity, quantum mechanics, and religion. He has a number of followers who agree with him and parrot the same claims. It's funny looking through his material because it soon becomes clear that he doesn't understand relativity theory. He thinks he has debunked it, but does not realize the fact that analogies are not supposed to be taken literally, and says stuff such as, "Where is the rubber sheet which prevents Mercury from leaving the solar system?" He also continually simplifies the part of the theory that objects with mass curve spacetime into warped space. As far as he's concerned, warped space is the only thing which relativity boils down to. He fails to acknowledge the fact that in relativity, space and time are combined into spacetime. And all along he makes claims and assertions such as, "In physics we don't use equations," and "In science we have no use for time." As far as he's concerned, physics deals with objects only, which are connected by what he calls electromagnetic threads or ropes. If I have the time, I'll put together a debunking of his so-called debunking. I've only scratched the surface here. Suffice to say, even if his electromagnetic ropes have any connection with reality, which I strongly doubt, his debunking of relativity is deeply flawed. He does the same thing with quantum mechanics, but I'm not going to address that just yet because my understanding of it is much more limited. Anyway, I'd say he's a good example of a pseudoscientist. A real scientist would never make comments such as these. Real scientists work with the scientific method, the purpose of which is to find out how things really are. Richard Feynman says it better than I could.
Now I'm going to discuss how we would look for a new law. In general, we look for a new law by the following process. First, we guess it. Then we so don't laugh, that's really true. Then we compute the consequences of the guess to see what, if this is right, if this law that we guessed is right, we see what it would imply, and then we compare those computation results to nature, or we say compare to experiment or experience. Compare it directly with observation to see if it works. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. And that simple statement is the key to science. It doesn't make a difference how beautiful your guess is, it doesn't make a difference how smart you are who made the guess, or what his name is. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. That's all there is to it.
In A Demon-Haunted World, Carl Sagan wrote about a baloney detection kit. I'll read a short extract here. What's in the kit? Tools for skeptical thinking. What skeptical thinking boils down to is the means to construct and to understand a reasoned argument, and, especially important, to recognize a fallacious or fraudulent argument. The question is not whether we like the conclusions that emerge out of a train of reasoning, but whether the conclusion follows from the premise or starting point, and whether that premise is true. A baloney detection kit is something I think should be encouraged in everybody. As always, thanks for watching, and don't take my word for it. I'm just sharing my thoughts and ideas.
Thank you.